Hi, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And this is Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder. And pretty please go over to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check out our sponsor page. If you ever need anything, see if you can give them any of your business because they make this podcast possible. And while you're there, scroll down and enter your email address and we'll send episodes straight to your inbox every week. And we are on Patreon, and we would love to have you over there. We have extra episodes, ad-free episodes, mini podcasts, Zoom hangouts. We have a Revolution Parenting podcast. We have a lot of things going on over there. And we are still, so you can check the link at the top of the show notes under this episode, wherever you're listening from. And we are also still hosting our ongoing giveaway for people who leave reviews on iTunes or other podcast apps, whether it's written reviews or stars. You can do whatever you can do and send a screenshot over to badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com, and we will send you a goodie bag of thank you for nursing in public cards and podcast stickers. And it's very fun, and add your address. And now Dianne has our review of the week.
It did. I do. Not it did. I do have a review of the week, and it's with a question. Hi, I'm a big fan of your podcast and so grateful for all your help it's given me as a first-time mom. I breastfed in public today for the first time. What a win. My question is about supply. I'm a 10-week postpartum, and I'm struggling with figuring out my supply. Some days I'm pumping off, Some days I'm pumping off oversupply. And some days I don't seem to have enough for him and have to give him bottles of the aforementioned oversupply I'd pumped out. Is it possible my milk supply hasn't calibrated yet? Is there anything I can do to be ensuring a steady supply? Thank you so much for all you do. I tell everyone about your podcast. So when you are pumping, it is really common that you get different amounts at different times of day. So it's going to look like your supply is not settled because in the morning you get a lot of milk. It might look like oversupply in the morning. And then by the afternoon or evening, you're not pumping quite as much. That is really, really normal and expected that you're going to pump different amounts. So if that's what's making you think, oh my gosh, my supply isn't regulated yet, that's just because pumping is not a really good, it's not a good way to determine what your supply looks like.
Yeah.
I think it's what I'm just trying to say. Yeah.
It's not a good indicator of supply.
Exactly.
It's not a good measure. It's not a it's not a unit of measurement when it comes to supply, how much you pump.
So I'm sure that your supply is just exactly what your baby needs. Maybe sometimes you do have a little bit extra, and that is because of different hormonal fluctuations throughout the day and things like that. And it's just going to do that. Your supply regulates after the first couple of weeks, and then it regulates again at around 3 months. So you might notice some changes after like 3 months, but most people just kind of glide right on through. So I'm sure you're doing just fine. And congratulations for nursing in public for the first time.
I know. That's
that
exciting.
Be like a milestone. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And thank you for leaving that for us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, the questions are good because sometimes it's like people have a question, but it's not necessarily like a whole episode to answer it. So, along with your reviews or whatever is good.
Yeah, if you have a question, you want to send in with your review, and then we'll send you stickers and nursing in public cards. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, today we have something kind of different. There's I've been holding on to a couple of emails that I got that are very lengthy, because they share a person's entire experience. And I was trying to wait for some way to fit it in. And then we finally just decided that we'll just make this an episode. So I'm going to read this email. It's very long. It's a very good story. And she tells it very well. And it's worth talking about. And so we're going to read it, and then we're going to talk about it at the end. It's like our little book club.
That's a way to talk about it.
This is from Hailey. She says, I have 2 kids. The third is on the way. And I was successful at breastfeeding both, with reading 2 breastfeeding books while pregnant with the first, having a home birth both times, making decision not to see pediatricians, etc. None of the women in my family, grandmothers, breastfed. So I had no real support from any of them. Now she's not telling you to not see a pediatrician. She's just saying that she was doing it her way and she wanted to do it her way. This is her story. They weren't against it, the woman in her family. They just had no information about it and thus weren't able to offer any real support. Luckily, my mother-in-law, an older woman, my husband is 23 years older than me, so my mother-in-law is really like my grandmother's age. She breastfed her babies for about 6 months with all 4 of them. She offered decent enough support in that she could at least relate to the initial challenges I faced in the first week or so after birth, without responding, just give the baby formula. I also found your podcast during that time a few years ago, so that was reassuring. I have a 3-year-old and he breastfed until he was about 15 months. And this was due to my pregnancy with my daughter. I was about 30 weeks when I finally lost my supply. My daughter today is still nursing at 20 months, and I am 11 weeks pregnant or so. So I am not sure if she will wean or not, but I'm ready for it if it happens. My older sister had her first baby last year. She is older than me by 4 years. She never wanted to talk to me about birth, never asked me why I had a home birth, which kind of blew my mind because when I was pregnant for the first time, I was so curious about what every other mother was going through. If I had known a home birther, I would have been asking all the questions. But I digress. So I tried to just not be pushy about my views on birth and all that since she obviously wasn't interested. She told me she wanted to breastfeed, though, so I decided I could be a good support person for her. Since I remember how unsupported I felt by all our family members because of their lack of knowledge. I gifted her a breastfeeding book that I really loved. I told her about this podcast, and I told her, please call me after the baby arrives. Anytime you need support, even if it's in the middle of the night. She lives about 4 hours away from me, so I wanted to be available in the best way I could. We don't talk on the phone much, but I thought if she needed someone, she would take me up on it. So baby is born, and the early weeks come and go. I only hear from her if I text her first, but I try not to bother her. She and her husband didn't let our mother or anyone else stay with them in the first week or so. So I was really worried she was going to overdo it and lose her milk. When I checked on her and told her I was worried about her not having enough, she kind of snapped at me, so I backed up. Anyway, fast forward, she is 13 or 14 weeks along with baby in the postpartum, and me and our parents drive up for a visit. I see a very plump and relaxed baby. I see my sister is still nursing, so I'm thrilled that she has made it this far. But then I see there are also formula feeding too. I try not to intrude, but she did end up telling me at 5 weeks, baby wasn't gaining weight, so we had to supplement. And then she was venting about the issue that had arisen since adding formula, such as constipation and other gastrointestinal issues. I was curious about why and how she even knew baby wasn't gaining at 5 weeks old. But then I realized she has one of those fancy changing pads that also functions as a scale. So she was probably weighing the baby like every day or some crazy stuff like that. Anyway, so she was telling me she was worried she wasn't getting to be able to make milk for 6 months because she felt like her supply was already decreasing, which made sense because she was supplementing. And so I tried to offer some solutions like bed sharing. And she looked at me like I was crazy when I said that, even though I bed share both my kids. Again, she doesn't ask me about how or why I do things the way I do, and said that was not an option. I tried to gently explain that maybe she was too focused on measuring things, weight, peas, scheduling feedings, etc., and that sometimes being too data-driven can disrupt our intuition. Well, I guess I wasn't gentle enough because she just basically started crying after I started to say that and then avoided me the rest of the weekend. So it was a total failure on my part. I failed to be adequate support, so I didn't try after that. I have yet to see her since. I have a suspicion she instructed my mom not to bring me back whenever she visits. My mom has visited 3 or 4 times since. So it gets back to the whole scenario. If they said they wanted to breastfeed, but they don't want to do the things or learn about it in order to accomplish it. And then they are shocked at the result. Like, that sounds very judgmental, but it's how I feel most women are. I gave my sister helpful books and resources when she was still pregnant, but she didn't read them and instead defaulted to the hospital and pediatrician advice. She never asked me. So it's like I had to really swallow my pride and realize that if my sister wanted my help, my advice, my support, she would have asked. I should have backed off. And since then, I have. I do feel sad when I talked to her. Last time she said she was off of formula and fully breastfeeding the baby at 6 months. So I thought, that's great. And I said as much. And her response was, no, it's not great. I have to pump all the time. It's horrible. I thought it was so sad that her experience with nursing had to be so negative. She works and has baby in daycare, so I know her breastfeeding experience is vastly different from mine. I stay home and exclusively nurse. I can't pump hardly at all. I don't know how working women do it, to be honest. So this time I have a friend who is a first-time mom. She is pregnant and she did ask for my advice, but I have been cautious not to overdo it. Sometimes people say that they want advice, but they don't actually mean it. It's more like polite conversation or something. I sent her some resources and also offered to be breastfeeding support if she wants it. Amazingly, she bought the books and I told her about and is listening to y'all's podcasts. So I think she is serious about it in a way that is vastly different from many other women, like my sister. Still, though, I do not want to be pushy and too much, so I wait for her to initiate that stuff. So all this to say, I think this episode, which I don't even know if we talked about before we started this email, was about this episode, How to Help Other Breastfeeders, that she was listening to. This episode is much needed for us avid breastfeeding enthusiasts. It's so hard to resist the urge to just tell others all the things. And we just have to sit on our hands and do nothing because it's their journey, not ours. Everyone is wherever they are at, and you just can't force these things. It's sad, but it is what it is. And that's all. The end. Now, I liked this email because I loved how she was being really honest about how pushy she was being, and then realized that that was not helpful. And I think in that episode, How to Help Other Breastfeeders, we were talking about that, like how to support people and what is like the appropriate amount of push, I guess, or like, you know, where's the line between like wanting to help and then intruding and you know, because people who breastfeed are super enthusiastic about it. It's true. Like, we want to share all the things. We want to tell people all the things because we're learning along the way too. We didn't know any of this. And then, you know new stuff. You're like, okay, I want to tell everybody. I want to be really excited about it. I feel like that's one aspect of it, of many. And it, in her situation with her sister, it's so sad to read how like she hasn't seen her sister since that time that she went to visit. And, just, I don't know, that makes me very sad.
It is sad. It is. And I think, too, something else that was probably happening in there was probably some mental health stuff, some postpartum mental health stuff happening with her sister that she was struggling a lot with. And it is really, it's hard. It's sad. And you want the, you know, it's, I know she kept saying, like, I don't understand why she doesn't want to get the information. But some people just don't want it. Some people just don't want to know. And I've definitely met people like that in my journey doing this work, that people would say, I don't want to know, like prenatally, they'd be at a breastfeeding class and be like, I don't want to know anything about childbirth. I don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to know about it. It's scary to me. I'll deal with it when it comes.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's just how they function.
Yeah.
And for people that aren't like that, it's really hard to understand that that's how they want to be. It's, you know, and I could see how she would be like, she's taking the advice of the pediatricians and stuff over me. And that's really hard when you're really trying to offer in a very peer support type of way. And then somebody doesn't want that information. You know, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes people, especially postpartum or just in general, no matter what a person's going through or however they're handling whatever's happening, they literally don't have the brain space for it. You know, It's like, I have to learn something completely new. This is all kind of, you know, it's like a very silly example is like, Jack always wants to play these games like Magic the Gathering and Civilization. I don't know if anybody knows these games, but they're like super long role-playing games that are really complicated. And like I look at, he's like, you want to play with me? And he starts explaining it to me. And I'm just like, my brain just dies. My brain's just like, what? No, I don't know. Nope. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you can play, with someone else. I can't, my brain just shuts off. And it's not that I don't want to do something that my son wants to do. Like if anybody knows me, of course I do. I want to do things with him and enjoy his interests, but I literally cannot get the information in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't, and then think about how you just had a baby or you're pregnant and who knows what else is going on with people's lives. It doesn't even have to be, big trauma. It could just be whatever is happening with you at that time. You're just like, I cannot with that information. Like I just can't, you just literally don't have the brain space for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I mean, that's fine because we do have other options. We live in this country where we do have other options. And, if we want to just do whatever our pediatrician recommends, that's okay. That's what a lot of people do. And if that's not, if you really want to breastfeed and you're really driven, then it's not okay to be told to just wean or just use formula. That's not cool. But if that's not what you want, if you don't want to breastfeed, if that's just not where you're at, you don't want to, you literally don't feel like learning all that new information. I mean, no one can tell you that's wrong.
Right.
No one gets to do that.
And I was just going to say, if you are somebody that isn't 100% involved in wanting to make breastfeeding work, somebody says, oh, here's this formula, it's not going to bother you.
Right. Yeah. And if it doesn't bother you, you're the one who's going through it. You're the one with the baby. And if it doesn't bother you, then it doesn't need to bother anybody else.
Right. And it's hard not to kind of, for some reason, we take those things personally, right? Like we take it personally when somebody doesn't want our help or somebody doesn't want to listen to what we have to say. I think her sister was more on the extreme end because it does sound like she was kind of like, it sounds like she was giving information, but she's Hailey. She's giving the information, but she's not judgy. Like she wouldn't have been like, oh my gosh, why are you doing it this way? I told you to do it this other way. It doesn't sound like that's how she was. It sounds like she was just trying to make suggestions for her sister.
Yeah.
And just like all of us would do. Oh, well, what about bed sharing? And her sister was like, no, oh my gosh, that is not an option for me. Okay. So it's not an option for you. But her sister, it sounds like there was other things going on, whether it be postpartum stuff, whether it be I'm the older sister, I don't take advice from my younger sister.
See, I was going to bring that up too. I wonder if there's some sort of dynamic there because when you're the younger sister, you don't really realize you're the younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really realize that and actually the older sister too. I had this because I have a younger sister, but I'm much older than her. I'm 11 years older than her. But we're both adults now, whatever. And we were talking on the phone one day, and she blew my freaking mind. We were talking on the phone one day about, I can't even remember what we were talking about, sharing opinions on something. And she goes, well, I mean, I think I value your opinion more than you value my opinion. And I was like, well, I really don't value her opinion. Like I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, I've never considered her. Like I lived 11 years, like all my formative years without her. Like I don't, I literally, when I think about things, I never think about how she's going to feel about it. Never think about what her opinion is on it. I never think about that. And she literally lives her whole entire life. What is Abby going to think about this? What is Abby going to say about this?
Yeah, and it's weird to think about, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's like the same. I see it with Jack and Exley. How Exley is just really focused on Jack and what Jack is doing and how he's feeling. And Jack doesn't really consider Exley ever. Not out of not caring, just out of that's what you do when you're the older one. You
So
didn't.
funny.
You were born when no one was there.
Right.
So that's not a thing that you really do.
Yeah.
You're the younger one, right?
I'm the youngest. Yeah. I'm the youngest one. Nobody gives a damn what I say.
I mean, it's true though. It's like you're fun to be around and we want to visit and I love you so much. But like, I don't know, considering your like opinion is just like not, never really considered it. So I don't know. Yeah. That could be, that very well could be because she's the younger, Hailey's the younger one, right? In the email.
Hailey's the younger one by 4 years. Yeah.
And so I mean, that could be a thing as well. And I totally feel like Hailey on this. And I because I think besides anything else, besides breastfeeders being super enthusiastic, besides like us, feeling like, we're doing it the best way, which, a lot of times we think like what we're doing is best and everybody should do it our way. All of that aside, sometimes you just want to share something with someone. Mm-hmm. Like, if I had, when I have, I think about my sister, like having a baby, which she's never going to do. But I think about like all of the, like, I would just want to like share that with her. I would want her to, I think it was so great. I thought it was very empowering. I really enjoy it. So I just want to like have somebody else do it too, so they could see how great it was and share that feeling with me. Like right. I feel like there's some of it that comes from this very genuine place of just wanting to share this thing that you love with someone else.
And you want it to work for them, right? Like you want it to work for them.
Yeah. I want them to want it. I want you to want it.
Mm-hmm. When my niece had her baby, which was like 4 years ago now, my sister, her mother, did not breastfeed her. Uh-huh. So my niece did come to me for like breastfeeding information prior to when she was pregnant and all of that stuff. And afterwards came to me for help. And I was so scared. Like, I didn't tell them that, of course, but I was so like, oh my gosh, is she going to just default to not breastfeeding this little baby? And I was really nervous for her. Like I really was, but I couldn't say anything. I could just like answer her questions and give her the support that she needed. And it was right at COVID time too, which was really hard because I couldn't go over there and camp out and all that stuff. But I was like, what is my sister going to say to her? Because my sister, like she invited my sister because she invited me over to do a breastfeeding class for her. So I went over there and I'm like, have your mother come. And of course, she's one of my older sisters. Mm-hmm. Have your mother come too, so she can get the information, so she won't feed you some kind of weird information when you're, No, she wouldn't. No, she didn't want
to.
Out. No, didn't
she
want
wouldn't?
To come. No. And of
what
course,
was her reasoning? Did she say why, or she didn't say anything?
She just didn't.
She doesn't want to listen to her little sister knowing all this stuff.
Exactly. That she didn't do.
Yeah. Oh God.
And and. So, and of course, it happened where the baby was fussy one time. Well, not, more than once. I'm sure she was fussy, but was fussy. And of course, my sister said, well, what did you eat today?
Oh, God.
And I'm like, this is why. And I said to my niece, I'm like, this is why I wanted her to be at one of those breastfeeding classes so that she wouldn't say anything like that, because that drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And I just was like pounding on the desk, and Tom's going to yell at me because it's going to end up picking up on my microphone.
Oh, yes. Now he has to edit it out.
I know. So, I mean, I get really fired up about it because it's like we want these families to take our advice because we are like excited about it. And we are like, oh my gosh, especially if that something is so, it's like, oh my, just stop scheduling feedings, just relax, just watch your baby. And just, like stuff that for us seems so simple.
Right.
But for other people just seems like such a challenge.
Well, and it's so the opposite of what mainstream kind of thing that you're seeing. It's probably the opposite of what your pediatrician is saying. It's the opposite of what you see other people around you doing. Mm-hmm. And then you're supposed to just, for some people, it's no problem to just, even in the beginning for me, doing something different than what everybody else was doing felt scary because
Yeah,
I'd never
it
been a
does.
parent before. And then it was like, oh, I'm supposed to do this, but they're saying to do this. And like, that's hard to just suddenly just not like, okay, I'm just not going to do what my pediatrician says.
Right.
Which, it's like Hailey doesn't seem to value pediatricians, any more than say me. Maybe even less. She doesn't even see a pediatrician. We see pediatricians. But, so she's not at all concerned about what pediatricians are saying. But the older sister is like, she's like, well, I'm going to go to a pediatrician. The pediatrician is saying this and you're saying this. And like, that's just super confusing and scary.
Mm-hmm.
And like, why? No one on earth would be like, oh, well, I'm going to believe my little sister more than my doctor.
Right.
No, like an older sister is not going to do that.
I know it. And I mean, I get it. Like I was the only one not the only one that breastfed, but one of my older sisters breastfed for a couple of months, and I'm the only one that breastfed as long as I did, and I'm the only one that breastfed exclusively.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like, it can feel really empowering too, at the same time, to be like, I did this and none of y'all did it either. And, and I made it work and I did it on my own. And it can feel very empowering. But at the same time, when you're trying to help others, it can be very frustrating. And when I was first working in this field, I was working as a peer counselor for WIC. Mm-hmm. And we came into this a lot, where we would really be excited about breastfeeding and about sharing it with these other people. And sometimes they didn't want to hear it. Yeah. And they were all with the WIC department, they were all on WIC that gives free formula away. So it's like,
of course. Yeah.
Like they didn't have to listen to us.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't, if they didn't want to. They could just get their formula and not have anything to do with us. And sometimes it was like we put a lot of effort into it and people would just be like, no, sorry, I don't trust you. I don't listen to you. I'm not listening to you. And it just makes you feel sad for them. And it sounds like Hailey, more than anything, just felt kind of sad that her sister, not that her sister didn't listen to her, but that her sister took her information and held it against her. Because that's kind of what it sounds like happened. She just kind of put that wall between them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Hailey and what I don't, obviously we're reading totally into this. That's what we're doing on this episode. Just talking about different scenarios and whatever. From the beginning, Hailey, in her most polite and wonderful way, was like, hey, if you ever need anything, let me know. You can call me anytime. But that ended up kind of for the older sister feeling like Hailey represented breastfeeding. And like whenever, that if she was going to talk to her, that she was going to, try to push it on her, whether Hailey was going to do that or not, that it sounded like the sister just sort of was like, it like she just became maybe worried or felt like she was going to push it if she went to her.
Yeah.
And, then she comes across this situation where the baby's not gaining. And you have somebody telling you that your baby's not gaining weight. That's terrifying.
Right.
And you're just going to do what your doctor tells you to do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. She's just trying to get through it. And, going to Hailey or talking to Hailey about it is just going to be like more suggestions on how to breastfeed and more suggestions on how to push this one thing. Whether Hailey was going to do that or not, the sister may have just felt like that was what was going to happen. And so, kind of put up a wall.
Right.
And that's so sad.
It
to
is.
feel like you don't have a relationship, with your sister. Because also Hailey had a bunch of kids before the older sister had her first.
Mm-hmm.
So Hailey was probably, oh my God, so excited. Like, oh my God, my sister is I'm going to be able to share this with her. I'm going to be able to, our kids are going to, grow up together. And And now she hasn't seen her since, and it sounds like their relationship is really rocky. Hopefully the older sister can. I don't know. I kind of want her to just be like, Hailey, back off. I don't want to hear it. This is not what we're doing.
Right.
You know? And it's, of course, like when Hailey went to visit and then the sister started crying, which, of course, is an indication that she was really overwhelmed. Hailey's like, well, what about bed sharing? And like bed sharing to us is like very normal. But to like, to somebody who is not educated on it, that's like the most extreme thing that you can suggest. It's like, oh, just like all you ever hear out in the world is that like that's going to kill your baby. And then she's like, oh, why don't you try bed sharing? Like that probably sounded so completely outlandish to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, all of this to say what Hailey ended up realizing is that it's their journey. You can do, I mean, if your aunt is a lactation consultant, you don't even need to say to her, like, hey, you can come to me with breastfeeding questions. Like, that's a given. And she came to you. Yeah. She initiated it. She came to you. And honestly, if somebody has a baby and they're your friend and they know that you have babies, they already know that they will ask you if they have a question and they want to ask you, they will ask you.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's nice to offer. But if you want to offer something, some support to whatever, maybe be even more open than Hailey was, open-ended with the suggestion. And just, hey, if you ever need anything, let me know. Like, don't even make it about breastfeeding.
Right.
Because then they won't come to you for anything. And they might have questions about something else. And you have had a baby and you'll know what to do.
But then, like, it sounds like her sister got back on the breastfeeding train, but was not happy with how it was going. So this could just be somebody who really, that's why I say, like, she might be struggling with some postpartum mood disorder stuff. Because then she was like, no, this isn't great. Because when, we're exclusively breastfeeding now. And that's great. No, it's not. Because now I have to pump. And this is, and all this other stuff. And it's like, well, obviously she wasn't happy with how things were going. But she got back to exclusive breastfeeding, even though she wasn't happy with it. So I don't think I think anything that Hailey said to her wasn't going to go over well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that's just where her mind space was.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I felt when I had my first. I didn't want to hear from anybody about anything, anytime, anywhere. Mm-hmm. I was pushing everybody away. Like, stop talking to me about stuff. No, you cannot come over here. So I remember having friends being like, oh, can we come over after work and, hang out with you and the baby? Which sounds like a normal thing to a normal person. To me, after a few weeks after giving birth, I was like, are you out of your fucking mind?
Yeah.
Are you out of your mind? Like, sit here and hang out? What are you talking about? How does that work? How?
Yeah.
I wasn't doing anything like that. I mean, I was just at home, in a panic, in a depression, in darkness. There was no hanging out.
Right. Big social?
Yeah.
Come on.
Being social. No. And then what? Not focusing all of my panic energy on the baby? You're crazy. So, I mean, that could just be too. She was just like, no, I can't have anybody around here.
And it sounds like she was kind of like that for a little bit because she wouldn't want anybody up.
Yep.
So I think there was definitely some other stuff happening there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the bottom line is when we're trying to help other people with breastfeeding, sometimes they just don't want our help. And we need to really try to gauge that.
Yeah. People just might not want it as much as we did. And that's fine.
Yeah, it can be really hard when you want to share that information and,
Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Good luck. Bye.
Bye.